Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2020 Chevrolet Equinox, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Demco tabless base plate kit. So there's going to be a total of 5 main components needed to flat tow your Equinox down the road. First one's going to be the base plate. Now, that base plate is going to provide us with a solid and reliable connection point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. The tow bar is going to be that second component. And this could actually be the physical link that connects the front of your Equinox to the back of your motorhome. Third main component is going to be your safety cables. And these are going to be there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. These are going to keep your Equinox attached to your motorhome. The fourth main component is going to be your diode wiring. So it's going to transfer the lighting functions from the back of your motorhome to the back of your Equinox, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, we're going to have our braking system. The braking system is going to apply the brakes in your Equinox whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome. That way it'll bring you to a more safe and predictable stop. So this is what the base plate is going to look like whenever you're not hooked up to your motorhome and you're just cruising around town in your Equinox. And probably the first thing I notice is it doesn't look too bad actually. It does do a pretty good job of kind of blending into the bottom of our Equinox here. And that's partly because it isn't very bulky, so it doesn't really stick out very far or anything like that. And since it does have a black powder coat finish, that really does help it kind of mesh or blend in with the plastic here. Now the base plate does come with these little caps here. So whenever you're not using the base plate, I would suggest putting these in. So these kind of just push in and rotate and kind of click into place. And honestly, I think it helps clean up our install look a little bit more. But more importantly, these are going to help keep dirt and debris and moisture from entering the base plate. And that way everything will function very smoothly, especially from years to come. And that's because the inside will stay protected. I do like the safety chain openings here. They're kind of up and off to the side a little bit, so they're really easy to get to, and they're extremely thick. This is solid steel, so to me that would give me a little more peace of mind. A nice touch too is the base plate's actually going to come included with a bracket here, and that's to mount up our wiring connector and our breakaway switch for our braking system. So that bracket kind of tucks everything back and allows you to get to it, but since it does sit a little bit further back, you're hardly going to even notice these components on the front of your Equinox. So this is what it's going to look like once you have everything hooked up. And everything's pretty spaced apart evenly and looks nice and organized and easy to work with. Now what's pretty cool about this base plate is that the arms that actually connect the tow bar to the base plate stay with your tow bar. And that's something you don't see with a lot of different ones. Most of them have a removable type arm that you have to take out and put in and then connect your tow bar to it. So with this setup, it's just one less thing you're going to have to worry about and one less thing you're going to kind of have to keep track of. Now, because of that design, it's going to be super easy to hook up and disconnect. So to take it off, or disconnect your tow bar rather, you're just going to pull out this pin and clip, then simply rotate your tow bar about a quarter of a turn, and then it'll just pull right out. Now what's cool about this design is that just about any tow bar is going to be able to pair up with this base plate, and that's because there's a ton of different adapters available. So right here we have an adapter. This is actually a Blue Ox tow bar, and that adapter is going to allow these two to pair together. So if you have a different brand tow bar, chances are pretty good it's going to be able to work with the base plate as long as you get an adapter. That being said, to get it back in, really straightforward. So you can see this hole right here, that's going to line up with this hole in our base plate. So you'll put it in, rotate it about a quarter turn, and simply just put your pin and clip back into place. One thing I am really impressed with is how well built this base plate is. It's very thick steel, so it should be very reliable and really give us that good feeling that we need going down the road, knowing that everything is connected good and we can focus on driving and getting to our destination, not have to worry about anything. I do like everything spaced apart, really easy to get to. The wiring here and the breakaway switch is a little tight. However, we do have a front license plate on our Equinox. If you're in a state that doesn't require it, it would be wide open and a lot more accessible. Now, one thing I do want to mention is the use of a high-low adapter, which is this right here in the back of our motorhome. Now, I bring that up because you're going to want your tow bar to be as level as possible, just like ours is today. So that's really going to depend on the height of your motorhome hitch and the height of our base plate here on our Equinox. So on our vehicle today, from the center of the base plate opening down to the ground is about 14.5 inches. But keep in mind that measurement could potentially vary a little bit depending on what model Equinox you have and etc. But the reason I give you that measurement, 14.5 inches, is you're going to want to measure your motorhome's hitch from the center of the pinhole down to the ground. And you want that measurement to be within 3 inches of each other. So that's going to determine what size high-low adapter that you're going to need. So in comparison to some of the other base plates available, this one's really going to give us that clean look and that option of being able to work with many different types of tow bars. Now, as far as the installation goes, it is a little involved. You do have to remove the fascia, but I will say everything is relatively easy to get to. So as long as you take your time, you shouldn't have any issues getting it done. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and do that together now. To begin our install, we're going to be working here at the front of our Equinox. So you're going to want to go ahead and pop the hood. And the first thing we're going to do is remove 6 fasteners along this top edge of our grille. So here's what the fasteners look like. We're able to pull all of those out using a T15 Torx bit. So now if we move to our front wheel wells, you can kind of turn your tires in a little bit to give us more room. But we're going to have 5 T15 Torx bit fasteners that we need to pull out. Once we have all those removed, you can kind of grab your wheel well liner felt and pull it down or off to the side out of the way. And if you look right up here where our fascia meets our quarter panel, we're going to see a 7mm fastener with the head up top, bolts facing down. We're going to need to pull that out as well. And I'm just going to repeat the same process over on the other side. So now underneath the front edge of our Equinox, we're going to have 6 fasteners that we're going to pull out. And we'll do this using a 7mm socket. So more or less it's just 3 on each side here, like that. Then on the very corner of our fascia here, we're going to have a small rivet, and we're going to drill that out, and that'll free it up. And once I have this one drilled out, we'll do the same thing over on the other side. So just put it in the center and drill upward. So now with an extra set of hands, we can remove our fascia. So what I like to do is just put some painter's tape here along the edge. That way, if it pops out a little too hard, I'm not going to have to worry about scratching up the paint or anything like that. But what you're going to do is start on your wheel well sides and just grab the edge and just carefully kind of lift up and pull towards you. And that will release these clips here. So once you get to about the headlight, you can carefully pull away. And don't yank too far just yet, because if we have any electrical connectors or anything, we're going to need to disconnect them. So in our case, we do have a connector here on the passenger side. That's what it looks like. So we're going to release it. We're going to take this red tab, push it down, and then push down in the center of that tab there. and separate the connector. Now that we have this free, we can take our fascia and set it off to the side somewhere safe. Now what we can do is remove our driver's side headlight. So we're going to have a total of 4 fasteners. 2 of them will be up top here, and those are going to be 7 millimeters. So get those pulled out and move on to the other 2. The other fastener is going to be kind of tucked back a little bit underneath the headlight right here. The last remaining fastener will be this one right here. So once we have that pulled out, we should be able to grab our headlight and remove it. So carefully pull it out. We'll probably need to disconnect it. So we have this connector here. Works like the other one. Just push out on that red tab. Squeeze the center. And release the connector. I'll just go ahead and set my light off to the side. At this point, we can remove our washer fluid tank. So starting up here at the top, our filler neck, we're going to have a 10 millimeter bolt that we'll pull out. Once we have that out, we can move on to some others that are along this edge. One of them is going to be right here. And we're going to have a nut right there. And we're going to have one more, but before we take that last fastener out, we're going to get everything unplugged first, pull that fastener out, and then we'll be able to remove our entire tank. First thing that we're going to disconnect is our lines. So we're going to have one right here and one right here. Now the way these work are pretty straightforward. If you just kind of squeeze in on these sides here, and pull out, you're able to separate the lines. So I'll do that for this one as well. We're going to have a total of 3 electrical connections. We'll start with this one. Pull down on the red tab, push in on the center, and work it free. These other 2 are going to be a little bit different. You're going to need a small flathead screwdriver, and what you're going to do is just kind of pry underneath the head of this little clip here, and we're able to pull it up and free it. So this is where my screwdriver was. You push up on it, you're able to release. And it's the same deal for this one right here. And finally, we can remove that last fastener. It's a 10 millimeter right here. And when we pull this out, we should be able to free up our washer tank. Once I have that removed, we can kind of pull out a little bit and just sneak our washer tank down and out, or we can set it off to the side. If you look right here, we're going to have this little air deflector on each side of our Equinox, and there's a diagram in the instructions, and they want us to cut out a portion of that. So I just marked it out with a yellow marker there, and this is pretty thin rubber, so I'm just going to use a pair of snips to open it up. And once I have this side done, I'll do the same thing over on the other side. Now what we can do on each side is pull out 4 of the bolts holding on our bumper beam. So these are going to be a 13 millimeter. Get all these removed. And then what we're able to do is take this bracket. They are labeled side specific, so be sure to check that. And you're going to want to fashion it this way, so this edge here is pointing towards the back of our vehicle. The way it's going to work, this is going to get sandwiched in between our frame and our bumper beam, and these big slots are going to line up with the bolts that we removed. So we'll just kind of pull out a little bit and put in our bracket. line it up with the holes. And then we're just going to take that factory hardware and get it started. We just want a couple turns on it. We don't want to run it all the way down. So once I have this last one in, I'm going to repeat this process over on the other side. Now with the extra set of hands, we're going to take our base plate, put it into position. It's going to go like that. And what we're going to do is take our bolts here and all the hardware that we use from this point on to hold on our base plate. You want to put on some blue Loctite, which I've done. And we're just going to take that bolt, run it through our bracket and into the base plate. So you may have to kind of maneuver it around to get it lined up, but that's normal. So we'll push that in, take that same bolt for the bottom one, and try to get that going as well. Then on the back side of the bolts that we put through, we're going to take the nylon lock nuts. We're just going to get them started hand tight for now. So now what you're going to do is push up and back on your base plate, and you want it to be as high and tight as possible on this edge and as far back as possible on this edge here. So once you have it in place like that, you use a couple of clamps to secure it and hold it there. And then what we're going to do is start to drill out our holes. So we'll just use the holes in our base plate as a template. What I'm going to do is get one started up top and then one started here on the side. That way we can kind of evenly distribute everything. Whenever you're drilling, be careful. You don't want to punch all the way through, and you could potentially damage components behind there, so just keep that in mind. Be careful when you get close. You don't want to try to punch all the way through if you can help it. So I'm going to do this one hole at a time here. So once I punch through one, I'm going to take one of these bolts, again put on some Loctite. I'm going to push that through. Then on the other side of the bolt, we can loosely secure it with a lock nut. So I'm going to do that same thing for this hole right here. With those two in, what I'm going to do is use a 9/16 socket and wrench, snug these down. That way we can remove our clamps and work on drilling the rest of the holes. The clamps out of the way, what I'll do now is come back and drill out this hole, this one, and this one down here. Once I have them drilled out, I'll come back with that same hardware combination, put our bolts through, and tighten them down. And once I have all of those drilled, the bolts in and tightened down, I'm going to repeat this same process over on the other side. So with our holes drilled and hardware in place, we'll come back and snug them all down. With all of these snug, we can come back and tighten down these using a 19mm or 3/4 inch socket. And then we can come back and tighten down the 4 bolts here, holding on each side of our bumper beam. Now we can grab our torque wrench and tighten down all of the hardware to the amount specified in our instructions. At this point, I went ahead and installed our safety cables. So what you do with these is you take this D-ring here, put it through this opening here in our base plate. You just take the included cable and you want to wrap it around your frame. So I just wrap mine twice just to kind of get some of the slack out. attach both ends to this D-ring, and that's all there is to it for that. So once you have it on this side, you'll do it to the other side as well. At this point, you can trim your fascia according to the diagram and the instructions, and reinstall everything the opposite way that we removed it. However, what I'm going to do and what I suggest doing is right now would be a perfect opportunity to install other flat toe components such as your wiring, braking system, and so on. That's because we're going to have all this extra room to work, and it'll make life a lot easier. So that's what I'm going to do now. Once some components are on, I'll reinstall the fascia. Now I do suggest before installing other flat toe components just to put back in your windshield washer fluid reservoir the opposite way that we removed it. That way we're not going to accidentally install other components right here or run wires there, and then in the long run having this interfere with that. So by putting this in first, that's something we're not going to have to worry about, and we know that we need to work around this. So now what we can go ahead and do is trim out our front fascia. That way it'll clear the base plate and our other components. So there's a diagram and the instructions. So I'm just going to take out this little area here. And this pretty thin plastic, so I'm just going to use a pair of snips to cut those out. May be able to use a utility knife or something like that, or a Dremel tool would always work fine as well. Now that we have our bumper trimmed out, you can put it back on the front of our Equinox and reinstall it the opposite way that we removed it. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Demco tabless baseplate kit on our 2020 Chevy Equinox.